My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 34, and 9 years ago I left my family's estate without a single goodbye. No fight, no raised voice, just a quiet exit with 2 suitcases and a dream no one believed in. Tonight I walked back through that same marble doorway alone, unannounced, and sat at the table where I was once treated like an afterthought. By the end of the night, they found out what I'd built in silence, and why I never needed their approval to begin with. Before I share how one forgotten daughter turned rejection into power and left her family speechless at their own table, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been underestimated by the people closest to you, don't forget to like, comment, and hit subscribe. Because some of us were never really invited to the table, but we showed up anyway. I pulled into the Whitmore estate just after sunset. The air was still the kind of stillness that comes before a storm, or maybe just long-buried silence resurfacing. My 2012 Honda Accord eased between a black Porsche Cayenne and a pearl-white Tesla Model S. Their doors had clicked shut with that sharp, intentional finality. Mine closed softly, almost silently, just like me. It had been 9 years since I last walked through that front door. 9 years since I left without a single confrontation, no slammed doors, no raised voices, no final words. Only absence. Back then, all I had was a secondhand laptop, a notebook full of untested ideas, and a leather-banded wristwatch given to me by someone who actually believed in what I could build. I still wore that watch. Tonight I was 34. I wore a navy dress from the back of my closet in Oakland. No labels, no designer tags, just clean lines and quiet defiance. I came alone. No partner, no publicist, no entourage. Just me, just Claire. The front door was already open, as if expecting me, or perhaps not expecting anything at all. Inside I could hear laughter, polished, measured. The kind of laughter that doesn't come from joy, but from habit, the way wealthy people laugh at cocktail parties when they don't want to spill their wine. I stepped through the marble entryway and into a house that hadn't changed since I was a teenager. The chandelier still spilled golden light over the long oak dining table. 16 chairs, crystal, sterling silver. The scent of veal and red wine drifted in the air like tradition, heavy and lingering. At the head of the table sat my mother, Margot Whitmore. Regal, composed, distant. She saw me, turned her head slowly, and smiled the kind of smile that warned more than it welcomed. "Well," she said, her voice carrying just enough to reach the help in the hallway. "The prodigal disappointment returns." There was a pause, then a few chuckles. From Andrew, my older brother, all cufflinks, courtroom bravado, and Harvard smugness. From his wife Tessa, the kind of woman who once told me success was a well-timed marriage. And from cousin Spencer, Wall Street loudmouth with a wine glass in one hand and opinions in the other. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I just walked forward and took the last empty seat between a chair no one wanted and a silver platter no one offered me. Across the table, Andrew raised his glass. "To high standards," he said, smirking. I didn't lift mine. No one noticed. Or maybe they did, and that was the point. I glanced down at my wristwatch. The minute hand clicked forward. Still ticking. Still mine. There's a photograph somewhere in this house. Probably still framed in the hallway near the study between my father's law degree and Andrew's rowing championship plaque. It was taken on the day of Andrew's graduation from Princeton. Everyone's in it. My mother in pale blue silk, my father in a gray suit, with the Whitmore crest stitched on his lapel, champagne flutes raised like crowns. I'm there too, just barely, off to the side. One foot is half cut from the frame, standing in flats holding my own plastic cup of sparkling cider. I was 22 then. I had just graduated from NYU with a degree in computer science, not Ivy League, not framed on the wall, not even acknowledged that day. At brunch, I'd told them about my job offer, a junior data position at a defense subcontractor in DC. My first real role. I remember the way Margot blinked once, then sipped her mimosa. That's niche, she said flatly. My father Gregory didn't even glance up from his phone. You know, Claire, he muttered. We could still make a few calls. Georgetown Law's summer intake isn't full yet. I nodded, folded my napkin, and let the moment pass. Like every other moment in that house, quiet, tight, suffocating. I didn't argue. I never did. Because in this family, emotion was a weakness. The challenge was rebellion. And silence was the only language anyone ever really listened to. The next day I left. No fanfare, no dramatic exit, no midnight screaming matches or declarations of independence. Just me, 2 suitcases, and a one-way Greyhound ticket out of Westbridge. I remember the bus station, its flickering lights, the stale scent of vending machine coffee, and the way the seatbelt buckled loosely around my hips, like it barely cared whether I stayed strapped in. I moved into a sublet in downtown Oakland. The apartment was barely 500 square feet. The pipes groaned louder than the streetcars. There was no central heating, but the coffee shop below had good Wi-Fi and better people. It was the first time I could hear my own thoughts. I worked late, slept little, coded on a refurbished MacBook I bought with my graduation gift card, sent cold emails, cold pitches, cold introductions. 57 rejections in 3 months, each one signed with some variation of, "not at this time." Then came number 58. A woman named Evelyn Tran, former NSA analyst turned angel investor. She didn't ask for a deck, she asked for coffee. She sat across from me at a plastic table and said, "Show me what you're building." I showed her the framework I'd designed, a secure infrastructure module for cloud defense systems. She didn't blink. She didn't nod. She just reached into her bag, pulled out a check for $200,000, and handed me a small black box. Inside was a wristwatch, simple analog, leather banded. "You'll need this," she said. "Not to count hours. To count how far you've come." That was the beginning of Virion Systems. No founding ceremony, no press release. Just lines of code, a rented P.O. box, and the sound of my own breath in the quiet hours before sunrise. We landed our first defense contract a year later, and when we did, I sent a short letter home, just to let them know. Not for approval, not for applause, just the truth. 3 weeks later, I received a reply. Typed, signed, Margot's letterhead. It read, "Don't associate the Whitmore name with something that may not last. No congratulations, no curiosity, no call." I kept the letter, framed it in the same metal frame they used for Princeton, placed it on my desk in Oakland beside the server logs, beside the stack of NDAs, beside the watch Evelyn gave me. Every time a contract slipped through, every time a partner pulled out, every time someone told me, "You're not ready for this space," I looked at that letter, not to remember them, but to remember who I had to become when they chose not to see me. That's the thing about silence. You can either be swallowed by it, or you can learn how to build inside of it. Dinner had already been plated when I returned to the present veal with wild mushroom risotto arranged on bone-white china rimmed in gold. The same set Margot had flown in from Milan the year I turned 17. I remember because that was also the year she forgot my birthday. The silverware hadn't changed. Neither had the wine pairings nor the chandelier above us. Time in this house moved in curated cycles. The seasons changed, but the stories at this table never did. I picked at the food, not because I wasn't hungry, but because hunger wasn't something this family acknowledged, not the kind of hunger that builds companies or drives someone to code until dawn. Here, appetite was always cosmetic, a garnish, a show of control. Andrew was mid-story when I tuned back in. Something about arbitration, something about a $1 billion deal that almost fell through before he saved the day. He told it like a trial summary, one hand gripping his fork like a gavel. His voice had the cadence of certainty, the sound of someone who's never had to earn silence before being allowed to speak. Tessa chimed in next, her tone slipping easily into admiration. Youngest partner in firm history, she said, eyes glittering. The pride in her voice was almost rehearsed like a script polished by repetition. She had told that line before, many times. Across the table, Spencer was louder than necessary, explaining to no one in particular why his portfolio manager was wrong about emerging markets. He gestured with his wine glass like he was conducting an orchestra only he could hear. And at the head of it all sat Margot, calm, pleasant, regal. Her smile didn't move. It simply hovered, sculpted into the lines of her face. Eventually, her attention turned to me. The room settled, forks lowered, glasses paused mid-air. "Still working in technology, dear?" she asked, as if technology were a place, not an industry, as if it were something vaguely embarrassing. Not tech, not cybersecurity, not Virion, just working. I nodded. Still building systems. That answer was enough to stir curiosity. Spencer leaned across the table just enough to intrude. "What kind of systems?" he asked. "Apps, platforms, crypto stuff." Before I could respond, Andrew jumped in. "Claire used to stay up all night in front of some clunky old Dell desktop," he said, laughing. "We thought she was trying to hack NASA," Margot added. "We assumed it was a phase." Her voice was light, almost fond, but not really. Tessa sliced delicately into her veal. "Do you have a team now?" she asked. "Or are you still doing it all solo?" The truth. Virion had over 300 employees. Offices in Zurich, D.C., and a new team are being assembled in Sydney. We were preparing a NATO bid, but I kept it simple. "No," I said. "I have help." Andrew smirked. "Eventually, everyone needs a real career." The laughter that followed was smooth, surgical. Not cruel, just practiced. The kind of laughter that says, "You're still the story we tell to feel better about ourselves." Margot stepped in with the voice she used during charity galas, measured, diplomatic. "Claire's always carved her own path," she said, lifting her glass slightly. There it was, that word again. Different. A gentler cousin of disappointment. Polished but still sharp. It always meant the same thing. Not like us. Not one of us. Andrew raised his glass next. To the rebels in the family, he said, his smile paper thin. "May they find their way back before it's too late." I didn't raise mine. I looked down at my wristwatch instead. Still ticking. Still mine. And as the dinner pressed forward with Spencer's voice rising and Margot's smile never faltering, I sat there invisible in plain sight. Not because I was small or afraid or unsure, but because that's how they had trained themselves to see me. Not absent, just unnoticed. But what they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that every tick of that watch marked not just time passed, but ground gained. Dessert had just arrived, fig tartlets drizzled with lavender honey, served with a dollop of crème fraîche. The scent was delicate, intentional, the kind of dessert that looks prettier than it tastes. I didn't touch mine. Andrew had moved on to a story about depositions in Miami. He was speaking to no one in particular, probably just to hear his own voice echo against the marble walls. The same walls that had once swallowed my voice whole. Tessa leaned in occasionally with supportive nods. Spencer interrupted twice to correct him on legal nuance. Margot, of course, presided like a silent conductor, cueing smiles and small talk with the lift of a brow or the tilt of her chin. I sat quietly, not because I lacked something to say, but because I no longer felt the need to offer anything to that table. I wasn't there for their validation. I had outgrown that need the same way I had outgrown this house elegantly without fanfare. Then came the sound. A soft knock from the entryway. Not urgent, not out of place, just enough to draw attention. The room paused. Moments later, a figure appeared at the far end of the dining room, composed, graceful, and dressed in all black. She stood out instantly, not because of what she wore, but because she didn't belong to them. It was Noelle, my assistant. She never wore black unless I asked her to. Tonight I had. She walked with steady, deliberate steps, her heels silent against the hardwood floor. She didn't look at anyone else. Only me. When she reached my chair, she leaned in just enough so her voice wouldn't carry. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Whitmore," she said softly, with just enough deference to be polite and just enough clarity to be heard. "But the jet is ready. The pilots need final confirmation for Zurich. They'll have to file the flight plan within the next 20 minutes." The fork slipped from Tessa's hand. It struck the china with a dull ring, bouncing once against the edge of her tartlet. I didn't flinch. "Thank you," I said, reaching for my cloth napkin. "Tell Captain Reyes we'll proceed as scheduled. Stop over in San Francisco for the board vote. I'll join the call en route." Noelle nodded once, then turned, then left, just as smoothly as she'd entered. Silence followed. Not awkward silence, not confused silence, dead silence. The kind that falls when something irreversible has happened. Spencer blinked slowly, like his mind was catching up in real time. Andrew's jaw had tightened. His grip on the stem of his wineglass shifted just slightly, a subtle tell. He was recalculating. And Margot? She sat straighter, as if posture could anchor her to a reality that was beginning to dissolve. Andrew spoke first. "A jet," he said, attempting lightness. "Claire, you have a jet." I dabbed at the corner of my mouth before answering. "Calm. Even. We use it for intercontinental meetings. Virion closed a Zurich partnership last quarter. Travel logistics get complicated with commercial flights." Spencer repeated the name slowly. "Virion. My company," I said simply. Margot's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with focus. "You have a jet," she repeated, as if the words themselves didn't make sense in her mouth. "I have a company," I corrected. "The jet is just efficient." Andrew laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. It came out strained, dry, brittle. "So what are you saying?" he asked. "That you're running some kind of real operation?" I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, opened the Bloomberg app, found the most recent headline, then slid the phone across the table. No drama, no build-up, just a quiet offering of undeniable truth. Virion Systems secures $900 billion defense contract with Department of Homeland Security. Beneath it, a photo me at a press conference in D.C., flanked by 2 federal officials and our general counsel. My name in bold beneath the caption. Spencer leaned forward. His eyes scanned the headline, lips moving silently as he took in the numbers. "That's you," he whispered. I nodded. No explanation, no justification, just confirmation. Margot reached toward the phone but didn't touch it. Her hands, usually so precise, trembled ever so slightly. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her voice thinner now. I looked at her. Not with anger, not even hurt, just clarity. Would it have mattered? The room didn't move. Not a single fork was lifted. Not a single tartlet touched. Even the candle flames seemed to hesitate, like the air around the table had thickened. Andrew was the first to speak, or rather to challenge. He leaned forward slightly, jaw-tight voice, steady but clipped. "That article could be exaggerated," he said. "Bloomberg sensationalizes, especially when defense contracts are involved." I tilted my head. Let the pause speak for me. Then quietly, "You think Bloomberg inflates federal defense contracts?" He looked away. Spencer hadn't said a word. He was still reading, still trying to catch up. His lips moved as he calculated the numbers, the scope, the valuation. I watched his face shift as understanding landed. 5.8 billion, he murmured. That's… No, wait. We crossed 6 last month, I corrected gently. Tessa's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine. She missed the glass. Her fingers brushed the stem but didn't close around it. It tilted, wobbled, then steadied. Margot was sitting straighter now, as if her posture could hold together the version of reality she had known for so long. The one where I had failed, or disappeared, or simply never mattered. Her voice came softer this time, controlled, almost maternal. You built this. Alone? I shook my head. Not alone. Just not with any of you. The silence that followed wasn't a surprise. It was exposure. The kind of silence that settles in when truth doesn't just arrive, it lands. Andrew gave a small laugh. Dry. Forced. He reached for the familiar script, the one people use when they're losing ground but want to sound generous. We're family, he said. You should have told us. We could have helped. There could have been synergy. But I remembered too well the meeting he'd had with our father when I was 25. The one where he called me a liability. The one where he recommended I be left out of the family Christmas newsletter for the sake of the Whitmore brand. So I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I just said, "You thought I was bad for the family name." I listened. Across the table, Margot finally looked up. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They hovered, searching, calculating, maybe regretting. Families say things they don't mean, she offered. I reached into my wallet, carefully unfolded a worn, creased letter, the one she had typed and signed 3 years ago. I slid it across the table. You told me not to put the Whitmore name on anything that might not last. She didn't touch it. She didn't deny it. Her hand hovered above the paper, then retreated. Not because she didn't remember writing it, but because touching it would mean admitting she had. Spencer saw the opening. He always did. He leaned in, trying to recover his charm. We're exploring tech, he said. We should talk. About capital. About partnerships. I mean, Virion's a rocket. We could bring alignment. I let him finish. Then I said, we're not raising. Tessa jumped in quickly, her voice light, a little too rehearsed. If we'd known, she said, things might have been different. We might have supported you. I looked at her. Not with anger, just exhaustion. They were different, I said. Just not for me. Then, for the first time all night, Margot's hand moved. Slowly, hesitantly. She reached for the letter, but stopped halfway. Her fingers hovered and froze. She couldn't do it. Not because the paper burned, but because acknowledgement was heavier than pride. My phone buzzed once in my bag. A soft vibration. Noel. Right on time. I stood, folded my napkin, placed it gently beside the untouched dessert. I have a board vote in 6 hours. We're bidding for a NATO contract. Margot's voice caught. The words were soft, fragile. Why tonight, Claire? Why come at all? I paused at the doorway, my back still to them. Then I said, to see if anything had changed. I turned. It hasn't. And then I walked out. Behind me, the dining room held its breath like a stage after the final curtain. But the actors were still frozen, still trying to remember their lines. The hallway was quiet, not sterile, not cold, just still, like a place that had forgotten how to move forward. My heels echoed softly against the polished stone floor as I walked, the same floor where I once dropped my acceptance letter to NYU and watched no one pick it up. But that version of me was gone. The dining room remained behind me, holding its breath. The air smelled faintly of fig and wine and denial. Then I heard it. Movement. Rushed. Uncertain. Andrew's voice reached me first, smooth but too quick, like someone trying to grab a falling mask before it shattered. Claire, wait. I stopped, didn't turn. He stepped into the hallway, hands half raised, part peace offering, part strategy. Maybe we should talk. Investments, he said. If Virion is expanding, there could be alignment. Strategic partnership. Something that makes sense. I turned just enough for him to see my expression. Calm, unbothered, firm. You mean now that you believe I exist? He hesitated. No words. Spencer appeared next, always the opportunist, always ready to follow whichever scent led to power. Hey, listen. He began, his tone forced, casual. I've always believed in you. I mean, I knew you were smart. I just didn't realize. He trailed off. I let the silence land before finishing it for him. You didn't realize I stopped needing your approval years ago. Tessa was next. She moved slower, more carefully, as if changing her tone might somehow erase the years. If you're ever hiring, she said, I've actually been exploring tech-adjacent fields. A little late, I know, but I'm a fast learner. I looked at her, really looked. She used to laugh when I tried to explain what I did. She once told a friend I worked with screens. So I asked her gently, but without flinching, can you name one programming language? Her mouth opened, paused, then closed. She looked away. Behind her, the chandelier light still shimmered, casting gold over a family that no longer held the spotlight. And then, Margot stepped forward. Each of her steps was deliberate, controlled, but not confident. Her face was composed, but her eyes, not quite. You're angry, she said. I understand. But don't let pride close doors that family can help keep open. There it was again. That word. Family. The one they used when they needed to sound like something they hadn't acted like. I took a slow breath. You had 9 years to open a door, I said. You chose to paint it shut. Her voice softened, slowed. You're still a Whitmore. That name means something. I nodded once, not in agreement and understanding. It means everything. To you. Then I added, and nothing to the world I built. It wasn't spite. It was true. She flinched, just slightly. But I saw it. Her hand reached out not with warmth but with instinct. The motion of someone trying to pull back control. I stepped aside. Don't, I said evenly. This isn't a fight. This is a line. My phone buzzed again. Right on time. Noelle. As precise as always. I reached for my coat, slipped it on. No rush, no wait. Just closure. As I walked toward the front door, I turned one last time. Not to them, but to the house. The stairwell. The wallpaper. The shadows of everything I used to question about myself. And I said softly, you always thought I left because I failed. A pause. But I left because I finally understood I didn't need to pass your tests. Then I opened the door and stepped outside. The wind caught the edge of my coat. The cold brushed my cheek, but it didn't reach me. The driver was already waiting, engine running, door open, expression neutral. Noelle had chosen well. Efficient. Invisible. Discreet. I didn't look back. Not at the columns. Not at the windows. Not at the people who once measured my worth by what I wore, who I dated, or how loudly I spoke. The silence inside the car felt different. Not tense. Not defensive. Earned. I looked down at my wristwatch. The minute hand ticked forward. Still ticking. Still mine. The car pulled away from the Whitmore estate without a sound. No tires screeching. No voices calling after me. Just the crunch of gravel under the wheels. And a quiet that didn't feel empty. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I wasn't hoping someone would follow. Because that version of me, the one who lingered in doorways hoping for permission, didn't exist anymore. The driver didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was intentional. Like Noel had instructed him not to disturb what had just been earned. The leather seat was warm. The hum of the engine is steady. I leaned my head back, eyes open, not watching the road, just letting the past recede behind me, one curve at a time. I didn't look back. Not at the gates. Not at the lawn I once mowed as punishment. Not at the people I used to think I needed to impress just to belong. The farther we drove, the lighter I felt. Not in a way that floats, but in the way something finally sets down after being carried too long. My phone buzzed. Once, then again. I didn't reach for it right away. It wasn't urgent. When I finally opened it, the screen lit up with a stream of notifications. A LinkedIn request. From Tessa. The message said, "Impressed by everything you've built. Let's catch up. I'd love to hear more about Virion's hiring plans." A voicemail followed. Andrew. His voice was softer than usual, like he was performing closeness, unsure of his lines. "Claire, I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe we should reconnect. There's value in family synergy. Let's not waste what we could build together." Then an email. Spencer. Subject line, opportunity. 12 paragraphs about capital access, tech innovation, cross-market momentum, the kind of language that dresses greed in diplomacy. And then, a final notification, a courier delivery, signed from Margot. I didn't open it. Not at first. I just stared at the screen as the tracking updated. Delivered. Received. Left at the front desk of my building in Oakland. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened my inbox, forwarded each message, one by one, to Noel, with a 2-word instruction block list. That evening a delivery left my hands, not to respond, not to retaliate, just to return what never truly belonged to me. A single black box sent to the Whitmore estate. No card, no signature. Inside it, the folded letter Margot once sent me, the one warning me not to use the Whitmore name. And next to it, a photo, taken from outside their dining room window, all 16 seats in view, the place settings, the wine, the tartlets. The laughter fell silent. And one empty chair, mine. Taped to the back of the photo was a single note handwritten. It didn't explain. It didn't plead. It simply said, "I was there. You just didn't see me." Some of us were never really invited to the table, but we still remember who looked away. No signature, no address. Because sometimes, the loudest message is the one that doesn't ask for a reply. There's a certain kind of clarity that only comes when no one expects, no pressure, no ape, no, "See, we told you." When I left Westbridge at 22, I thought I was walking away from family. I didn't realize then. I was also walking toward myself, toward silence, toward autonomy, toward the terrifying, liberating possibility that no one was coming to rescue me, and that maybe, just maybe, that was the point. For years I told myself that one day, if I became successful enough, they'd finally see me, finally understand. But what I've come to learn slowly, painfully, and honestly is that people don't always fail to see you. Sometimes, they refuse to. Because acknowledging you means revising the story they built around themselves. And for some people, the story is more sacred than the truth. Margot once told me that family was legacy, something passed down, polished, preserved. But what she really meant was control. To be part of the Whitmore legacy meant to play a part someone else had already written, to wear the right dress, say the right things, marry the right kind of ambition, be visible but never too loud, capable but never intimidating, successful but never beyond what made others comfortable. And when I didn't fit that mold, I wasn't corrected. I was erased. At first quietly, then proudly. The mistake they made, the one they'll never quite understand, is that I didn't build Virion to prove them wrong. I built it to prove me right, because after all the silent dinners, the edited holiday cards, the birthdays skipped the wins, ignored the doors that never opened, I stopped trying to earn space in rooms that were designed to keep me out. Instead, I built my own. Not louder, just stronger. Not shinier, just real. And in that room, I learned what family really means. It's not who shares your blood. It's who stays when you have nothing to offer but honesty. It's who listens when you speak softly. And who remembers your name when there's no applause. Noelle once asked me if I ever missed them. My answer came without hesitation. I missed the idea of them, not the reality. And that's what made everything lighter. Realizing that I didn't fail to belong. I just stopped asking the wrong people for a seat. And the truth is, not being invited to the table was the most generous gift they never meant to give me, because it taught me to stop waiting, to stop shrinking, to stop making myself understandable just to be tolerated. And once I stopped waiting for their welcome, I found my own worth, one that doesn't need validation, or forgiveness, or permission to exist. The kind of worth that walks out of the Whitmore estate unshaken and steps onto a jet bound for Zurich, not to escape, but to lead, to speak, to vote, to decide. Because sometimes success doesn't look like standing at the head of a family table. Sometimes it looks like leaving it behind. The jet lifted from the tarmac just past midnight. Oakland's city lights faded beneath the clouds, soft and scattered like memories I no longer needed to hold tightly. I sat by the window, not because I wanted the view, but because I wanted the space. The silence in the cabin wasn't heavy. It was calm, earned. Noelle moved through her checklist a few rows behind me, efficient as ever. Head down, hands steady, not intrusive, just present. She knew I wouldn't speak until I was ready. And when I was, I said softly, "Send the Zurich board my preliminary analysis. I'll review the proposal before we land." She nodded. No questions, just movement. That's the thing about people who truly see you. They don't require explanation. They recognize the rhythm you live by, and they move in tune without stepping on your silence. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to sleep, but to remember. Because as much as I'd like to say I built Virion entirely on my own, that wouldn't be true. There was one person who changed everything. Evelyn Tran. She found me before I found my voice. Back when I was cold emailing government agencies from a rented studio apartment with pipes that whined louder than the streetcars outside. She'd responded to a pitch I barely remember sending. Asked to meet for coffee. No NDA, no investor deck. Just curiosity. I'd arrived 2 minutes early, clutching a binder with more hope than polish. She showed up right on time. No assistant, no fanfare, just a black coat, black boots, and a black notebook she never opened. "Walk me through your framework," she'd said. And I did. Hands shaking, words stammering. Logic all there, but still raw, still unproven. She didn't nod politely. She didn't pretend to understand. She stopped me. Twice. Asked hard questions. Pushed where others had smiled and let me fail quietly. Then when I finished, she looked at me for a long moment and said, "You're not building an app. You're building a gate." I blinked, confused. She continued, "People think cybersecurity is about keeping threats out. But the real value, knowing who to let in." Then she handed me a check for $200,000 and a small black box. Inside was the chronos, the leather-banded wristwatch I still wear today. "You'll need this," she said. "Not for keeping time. For tracking distance. You're going farther than you think." She never asked for updates, never hovered, never demanded a seat at the table. She just watched me walk toward it, and when I got there, she nodded. Quietly, proudly. Because some people don't need credit, they just need you to make it. And when I think about the difference between my real family and the people I've chosen, it comes down to this. My family saw me as a version of what I should have been. Evelyn saw me for what I already was. Not polished, not finished, but possible. And maybe that's what we all need. Not applause, not legacy, not bloodlines written in gold. Just one person, willing to say I see it. Now go prove the rest of them wrong. The sky outside the jet was velvet black, that kind of high-altitude stillness, where even turbulence forgets how to move. Zurich was 5 hours ahead. The board vote was in 6. I opened my laptop fingers, already moving before my thoughts caught up. Muscle memory, decisiveness honed by 1,000 late nights, slide decks, final projections, threat mitigation protocols, everything precise, everything mine. Across the aisle, Noelle handed me a fresh espresso in a matte black mug. No logos, no labels, just clean lines and quiet utility, the kind of elegance that doesn't need to announce itself. "Thank you," I said softly. She nodded and stepped back, letting me work. And as I skimmed through the final proposal for our NATO bid, something inside me shifted. Not anxiety, not pressure, but something quieter. Alignment. The kind that only arrives when every part of your life finally points in the same direction. There was a time not that long ago when I would have questioned my place in this room. Would have wondered if I was ready enough, loud enough, qualified enough to sit at a table full of world leaders and hardened strategists. But not anymore. Because now I knew power isn't volume, it's clarity. And clarity isn't something you're given, it's something you choose, just like a name. I glanced down at the signature line of our executive summary. Claire E. Whitmore, founder and CEO, Virion Systems. The name was still there, the family name, but it no longer carried the weight they thought it did. I hadn't changed it, not because I owed them anything, but because I'd redefined it. Every time someone said Whitmore in a meeting room now, they didn't think of Margot, or Andrew, or old money. They thought of Virion. They thought of innovation. They thought of me. The truth is, you don't have to reject where you came from to reclaim who you are. You just have to decide which part of the story you're keeping. And I'd chosen. I'd kept the part that reminded me how not to treat people. I'd kept the silence they used to dismiss me and turned it into SA strategy. And I'd kept the name, not for their pride, but for mine. Because when you build something from nothing, from grit and code and conviction that doesn't ask for permission, you don't need to burn bridges. You just build better ones. Noelle returned as the captain announced descent. I closed my laptop and looked up. "How's Zurich?" I asked. "Clear skies," she replied. "Ground temp is 52. Your driver will be waiting. The board's expecting you at 9. Good." I slipped the laptop into my bag, reached for my watch. Chronos. Still ticking. Still mine. As we touched down, I thought about all the tables I'd once been denied a seat at. All the rooms I wasn't invited into. All the conversations where my name was spoken as a cautionary tale, or worse, not spoken at all. And then I smiled. Because now, they don't get to define me. I do. And I don't speak to be accepted anymore. I speak to be understood. I don't build to prove my worth. I build because I know it. And I don't show up to dinner hoping for a seat. I walk in, with one already waiting. The conference room in Zurich was modern, minimal, every line deliberate, every panel of glass polished to reflect clarity, not decoration. 12 chairs, 6 screens, 3 translators, 1 vote. I stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly on the surface, not to brace myself, but to ground. Behind me, a floor-to-ceiling window framed the city skyline. Beyond that, mountains, steel and sky existing side by side, like legacy and innovation, like past and future, like me. The board had reviewed our proposal. They'd read the projections. They'd vetted our security clearances, our encryption layers, and our threat intelligence models. Now, they wanted to hear from me. Not a speech, not theatrics, just presence. I took a breath and spoke. Virion doesn't just protect infrastructure, I said. It anticipates vulnerability, not just in systems, but in assumptions. Eyes watched. Pens paused. Not out of doubt, but attention. I continued. When we designed our framework, we weren't chasing competitors. We weren't reacting to gaps. We were building for what no one was willing to see coming. A quiet beat. No grandstanding, no noise, just integrity line by line. Someone nodded. Another scribbled something down. I wasn't trying to impress them. I was inviting them into a standard I'd already been living by long before the contracts, the valuation, or the headlines. Because real leadership doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into a room and demand space. It creates space for clarity, for action, for trust. When I finished, there were no fireworks, no standing ovation, just silence. The kind that meant they heard me, not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't have to. When the final vote was cast unanimous, Noel gave a slight nod from across the room. Approved, secured, done. As the room began to disperse, one of the NATO advisors approached me. Late 40s, direct, British. His handshake was firm, but his voice was softer than I expected. "You don't talk like most people in your position," he said. I smiled. "I wasn't raised to take up space." He tilted his head. "And yet, here you are." I nodded. "Yes. But I got here differently. I wasn't handed power. I built it. Quietly. Thoroughly. Without an audience." He paused. Then said, "That's why it holds." And he was right. Because the power that holds isn't the kind that shouts across boardrooms or rattles at podiums. It's the kind that remembers what it costs to arrive and doesn't waste a single step. It's the kind that reads every line of a contract, not because it has to, but because it knows what being overlooked feels like. And it's the kind that chooses people carefully, not by pedigree, but by how well they carry responsibility when no one is watching. That's why I brought Noel. That's why I built Virion the way I did. And that's why I no longer doubt whether I belong. Because real belonging doesn't come from approval. It comes from alignment. From knowing that where you stand and how you lead match. The meeting ended. Chairs pushed in. Lights dimmed. But something had shifted. Not just in the room in me. I didn't feel taller. I felt still. Like I'd reached a center that had always existed, but now had space to breathe. I walked toward the exit. Noel is at my side, and as the doors opened, Zurich's morning light spilled across the marble floor. The city waited, and this time, I wasn't walking out of someone else's home. I was walking into my own. That evening, I returned to my apartment in Oakland. No penthouse, no glass tower. Just the same space where Virion began, one server, one desk, one woman choosing to keep going when no one believed she should. The letter from Margot was still on my counter. I hadn't opened it. I didn't need to. Some things don't ask for closure. They offer clarity in silence. I walked to the window watch still on my wrist, the city humming below. Streetlights flickering. Car horns are distant. The same world I once entered with 2 suitcases and no plan except belief. And somewhere between that night and this one, I became someone who no longer needed permission. not to speak, not to lead, not to leave. Because growth isn't about who finally claps for you. It's about who you become after they never did. I thought for a long time that being left out of the table meant I didn't matter, but the truth is, they were building a table to keep me small. So I built something bigger, a company, a community, a legacy not written in name but in action. They never saw me, but the world did, and I did. That was enough. My phone buzzed once more, a final message. This one, from a young woman, a student at NYU. She had seen the Virion press conference. She wanted to build something too. She asked if I had time for coffee. I smiled and replied with just 2 words, "Let's talk." Because some of us were never really invited to the table, but we never forgot who looked away. And now we remember who's still waiting outside the door. The difference is, we don't just hold the key, we are the door. So if you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever sat in silence while others laughed around you, if you've ever been told you were too much or not enough or just not quite right, don't wait for the seat they never planned to give you, build your own. And when it's ready, leave the door open for the ones who come next. If this story spoke to you, drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been underestimated, don't forget to hit subscribe, because your silence has power and your story isn't over yet.